everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of Super Geeks. My name is George. I'm your host, also known as Choosh99 on social media. Joining me today, I'm going to start with someone who has not been on the show for a while now, Mr. Michael Hinman. How you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing pretty good. Michael, what have you been up to?
Oh, work. Avoiding the rain. That's about it.
Well, what can you do, right? And are you still doing 1701 News, or what's up with you in the geekdom world?
Well, I mean, no. If I do a Star Trek site again, it'd be under a different name because I was never the biggest fan of 1701 News. That was kind of the suggestion of the Roddenberry side instead of mine. So one of the things that I did when I took over is I abandoned it pretty quickly. So we have like another moniker that we had put together a while ago that we had thought about using, and we still have it, but we just have to wait for some point to when we're ready to bring it back up again.
All right, and joining us again for the third time in a row, Mr. Carlos Pedraza. How are you doing, Carlos?
Always great to be here.
We always like having you here. So, real brief, just in case some new listeners, sometimes that happens from time to time. Briefly, what do you do out there in the world of geekdom?
Well, I'm an independent filmmaker, a screenwriter, and a journalist, and I was a producer and writer for Star Trek Hidden Frontier and Star Trek New Voyages, and currently I run the Axe Monitor website, which keeps track of the aftermath of the Axonar copyright lawsuit.
Awesome. And joining me today, someone that has worked with me in the past and in the future and the present, kind of like Doctor Who is, because I'm going to bring that up, is Sun Seal. How you doing, Sun?
Hi, but you didn't ask Michael Hinman what he did for a living.
Well, I asked him what he does in the world of geekdom. That's what I asked Carlos.
I mean, I'm just a newspaper editor, but one thing that I did wanted to mention, I wasn't even thinking about it, but our my original website, the one that kind of pulled me into all of this, which is where the sci-fi name comes from and everything else. It's not really active right now because once again, it's just so busy and so many other things happening in my life that it's just almost impossible for me to do. But it still exists. It still sits there. And on Monday, Airlock Alpha I guess officially celebrates its 20th anniversary.
I remembered that Airlock was part of the title. That was okay, and you said it. So Airlock Alpha. Oh, cool. All
Yep,
right.
Airlock Alpha that turns 20 on Monday.
Holy Jesus.
That is frightening.
I'll do whatever I can to make Carlos feel old. So that's I think Carlos was about 40 when the site
Mission
first came out.
accomplished.
Well,
But 20.
all we have to do is wait one more year, and we can legally force it to drink.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it hasn't been driven to it already.
I don't know. It's if you're in Canada, you're already okay. All right. And Son and I are. I don't usually mention this in the last couple episodes, but we have an exciting upcoming project we're doing. I've done called Starfinder. It's a Star Trek audio drama, and we have something coming up it's going to probably debut either next month or the month after, and it's called Ambrosia, and it's a Doctor Who audio drama fan series about a female.
No, don't go pushing artificial dates until we actually have it set in stone.
That's right. That's why I said probably, but we'll see what happens with the dates. I'm sure Carlos understands that
Just say
as a producer.
soon, TM.
And Carlos has done Star Trek New Frontiers or Hidden Frontiers and New Voyages episodes, and I'm sure he understands that people get excited when they're producing something. They want to say something, but they're not sure exactly. Right, Carlos?
I know that dilemma all too well.
Yeah, exactly. But Ambrosia is about a female companion of a Time Lord during the Time War. She becomes the Time Lord when the Chameleon Arch makes her into a Time Lord when the Time Lord dies. So she takes over the TARDIS during the Time War, and she's tasked with carrying on his mission because she has his memories and everything. And we have a great cast. The lead actor has worked for Renegades, and she's worked for the Foley for Star Trek Continues, Adrian Grady, and she's been a voice actress on Star Trek Online as well. So we're looking forward to it. She's excited about it. We're excited about it. We got good music by Timmy D, and a good cast, and we're looking forward to timing that so that this fall, well, at whatever point we finally launch the pilot episode, Jodie Whittaker's Doctor comes into play, and we're all kind of happy that female Time Lords are taking the lead finally. So I think this is going to be an exciting year for anything with Doctor Who fandom and the show itself, obviously. The first topic I wanted to get into is a kind of a hot one that's been coming out today, especially. It keeps getting updated. But during the con at Las Vegas, Patrick Stewart announced he came out as a surprise. No one knew he was going to be there, and he popped out and he announced that he's going to be coming back as Jean-Luc Picard. And because Michael hasn't been here for a while, I'm going to start off with letting him give me his opinion on what you think of this news, Michael.
I'm actually really excited about it. Of course, there's always that overall concern of the oversaturation, which is what we kind of experienced during the late '90s, early noughts, when you had Deep Space Nine running at the same time as Next Generation and Voyager, and movies coming out and everything else. But I think that in today's day and age, when especially when you have the Marvel universe and everybody else that seems to be dominating, even if there is a little bit of oversaturation, there seems to be enough venues for it. So, I mean, I love the idea. I think that the idea of having Picard not necessarily on a starship, not necessarily in Starfleet. I mean, who knows where Picard would be 20 years after Nemesis, and I think that it kind of, to me, it's something that seems more inspired by Logan. The X-Men's, not really spin-off, but the kind of the film with
Hey, he's
yeah.
friends with Hugh Jackman. You never know; he could get him to come in and push him around in a hover wheelchair.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so if you take that kind of the Wolverine aspect of it and bring it into the Star Trek world, I think that everybody or at least not everybody, but at least some of the people that are getting on there saying like, oh, look, this shows that Discovery was a mistake, or whatever other crap that you see out there about that. That's not what this is saying at all. This is not a return to Star Trek: The Next Generation. This isn't a reboot of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, this is a series set in the Star Trek universe that might be totally different from anything else we've seen, in the franchise.
That's what Patrick Stewart claimed on stage, that this would be totally different than what we've seen, what we should expect. What do you think, Carlos?
Well, I'm thrilled that it's happening, and I think that the expansion of Star Trek series and miniseries and limited series or whatever on CBS All Access, I think is a great thing, and I think it will be fairly easy to avoid the oversaturation problem that we saw in the '90s and the early 2000s. Simply by having more creative people involved and really having each show with its own identity. And I think it's pretty clear that Discovery has built an identity. The Picard show will have its own identity. The other two will also be unique in their own way. Whereas back in the day, apart from Deep Space Nine, which they sort of ran as a sort of a stealth operation, the other Star Trek series were just blah blah blah, more of the same. I mean, Enterprise could have easily been a Next Generation series. It's just set in it was the same sort of stories, and it was getting old by the time. It was getting old by the time of Voyager, and certainly old by the time of Enterprise, and that's because of the creative constraints that were placed upon the franchise by Rick Berman. He's not around anymore, so I think we're dealing with people who are interested in seeing each show take off in its own direction and appealing to different slices of the fandom out there, and I think that can only be a good thing.
What do you think, son?
Honestly, I think this is a kind of fulfillment of what they wanted Discovery to initially be, as a sort of anthology. And in this, they are able to have kind of what could become a mini-series along the lines of like American Horror Story or something, where they have a completely different kind of show to Discovery that does like little vignettes every different and that are different every season.
My opinion is this: you have an opportunity. There's the non-canon Orsi or Roberto Orsi with JJ's blessing kind of wrote that thing where Countdown, which is a comic miniseries to try to show the next generation side of what was going on that led Spock to go through and do the red matter thing that led to the JJ universe. It went back in 2009, and it was technically approved by Paramount, but if you read on the Wikipedia, Paramount doesn't actually say it's canon. They don't confirm that, so it's subjective. But that was their idea in their head when they said this is what was going on the other side of that event when Spock was taking Geordi's ship to go and do all that.
Well, they wanted to sell comic books.
That and Star Trek Online also took that, and me and Son play Star Trek Online. I don't know if you ever have, but they took that storyline and made it a huge part of how Star Trek Online began. Once we jumped into the game itself, and they were working with Paramount at the time to do all that. And the thing is that he was Ambassador Picard, working as a Vulcan ambassador, and he was working with Spock. He became friends with Nero. But the thing is, I don't think, and that was 30 years, so there's a 10-year gap in actual timeline. My opinion is, if they really want this show to have a lot of opportunity, and this is just my opinion, if I was helping them pitch an idea, you go with the part where the episode The Relic, where Galen, his mentor, who he was trying to get him to be an archaeologist and not a Starfleet officer, he would be doing the archaeology thing. He would be checking out something Starfleet's concerned about on alien worlds with some relics or something that they're mashing up, something that is a seasonal arc that's going on that affects the Federation. You could then have a new crew or even a new version of the Enterprise, or you could bring back Data and whoever, and they could be transporting him from planet to planet to check out these artifacts while doing his Indiana Jones or Indiana Picard thing, as fulfilling what Galen and him hinted that he would have done as a second career, which is being an archaeologist. But you can mix the two together and make a very interesting story, in my opinion, where Picard is exploring these alien ruins. He's getting transported around by a ship. Therefore you get your fan thing where you have the new ship. You could bring in other ships. You could bring in Admiral Riker sometimes with they could all be working on the same sheet of music for the overall plot for whatever they're doing this exploration for. And you could have Picard still be a retired Starfleet archaeologist and working with Starfleet. I think there's a lot of, and Q, of course, in my opinion, should be part of that journey too. And they should bring back John Delancey.
Okay, here I go. No, and might I add, no. I think that is completely the wrong direction to take this show in. I don't want a rehash of The Next Generation. I don't want something picked up from TNG and suddenly expanded into a spinoff. I don't think that's why Patrick Stewart was lured into coming back. I think he was lured into coming back because they want to do something completely different from what we've seen before, what he's done before.
He did say, I'm not trying to interrupt you, I'm going to let you pick up where you just stopped. But he did say something about this Picard has been affected by what he's experienced when we last saw her and his experiences. So there's something, I don't want to say PTSD because it's not like the last time we saw him he was traumatized, but something about his experiences has made him, I don't know, change course or whatever on his life. What do you believe would be the right way to go?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I wouldn't write out the possibility of him being an ambassador, but I don't see him as being a Starfleet officer anymore. I think you want that kind of a break from the past. I feel in some ways him being some kind of rogue, either disagreeing with the direction the Federation is moving in, and in his statement he talked about how there's something about our current day and age, which I think was an oblique reference to the neo-fascism rise in Europe and in the United States, that was one of the reasons that he believes there's something to say, that Picard has something to say in that series. And I think it's going to end up being something like that, where he's a voice of reason amongst a changed galaxy or a changed Federation that may be moving in a direction he doesn't believe is the healthiest.
Well, they kind of were hinting at that back when they did Paradise Lost with DS9, that the Federation could become easily lost and become a military state. Do you think that could be, like, because of what's happening today, being similar to the idea of that they could be revisiting that as far as, like, a concern in the post-Dominion War world?
Well, I think they may revisit the theme. I don't think they'll make a direct reference to DS9 on it, because it's, frankly, it's more of a relevant theme in current day, and Deep Space Nine is 25 years old. So yeah, it could be something along those lines. I mean, the Deep Space Nine raised a lot of interesting themes that would be very cool to explore. 20 years or more in their future, by the character of Picard. And I think there's a lot of room there for exploration of those themes that go way beyond taking a starship from here to there and having adventures. I think you're going to see something a bit more edgy. I think Michael is right. We're going to see something much more in tone, like we saw Patrick Stewart play in Logan. You're going to see some darkness, some edginess, I think, and some really compelling themes. It's not going to be ha fun, we're adventuring.
Do you think?
Yeah, I have to, and I have to agree with Carlos on. I think what, how I suspected this would be, and knowing the kind of characters that Patrick Stewart's wanting to play, and where he wants to see Picard, and I think where, where dramatically you want to see Picard, is that you're going to find somebody who, was once at the top of the world, kind of thing, the captain of the flagship, starship of Starfleet. And now I think it's somebody who is past that. Like, think about like a sports star, like a Michael Jordan or somebody who, once you're done playing basketball, what do you do now? Once you're done being president, what do you do now? Once you're done being, some superstar, what is it? What is your place in the world? I don't think you necessarily have to have some kind of major dramatic event happening in Starfleet or in the Federation or even in, in the Quadrant. I think that it could just be, that there could be some things happening that are stirring, just, that are probably a little more subtle than what we have right now. I think it's not going to be something where you're going to see somebody gallivanting around. I think you're going to see where Picard has to deal with the fact that he's not who he was before, that he's not, that he's not the same Picard who was running around the galaxy, that this is somebody who has to really explore who he is, explore where he's going, and I'm sure there'll be some adventure that takes, that carries him along, but I don't think it's going to be like, oh, let's try to find a way to put him back on a starship and practically make him count.
Well, do you think it's possible that people will be that there'll be political attempts to change in the Federation, and that people will be trying to use him to endorse them? Like you just exampled, like sometimes retired stars, someone who's trying to run for office will try to convince these people to let them endorse him, and then they have to decide, is he worth endorsing? And then they have that responsibility. Is this person worth endorsing? Do I agree with where he's going, where the Federation would go if he becomes elected? Do you think that could possibly tie in?
I don't know. I feel like that's probably too fine a point of speculation than we have any information to support. I think at this point we're safer talking about speculating about themes and approach and tone than we are anything that's going to be about story. I think they're going to hold that close to the vest probably for a while they're still continuing development.
There's one thread that keeps coming through in my head when we talk about Picard 20 years after being captain and possibly not being in Starfleet. And I think to myself, there are two major things that he would, now that he has all this free time in the universe to deal with problems that he's never dealt with properly. Being assimilated, because an episode of Brothers isn't just going to change that. and him losing the rest of his family.
Right. I was just watching that scene in Generations the other day. It's funny you mentioned that. He only gave up on that because he thought his brother had it covered, and then that didn't occur. And then he got his hopes up with the guy that he thought his son was from that Ferengi and so forth. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
In preparing for today's discussion, I actually did a rewatch last night of the TNG finale, All Good Things, and there was something that because it also is set 25 years, in the future, of course, and
right, yeah.
that particular timeline, of course, didn't happen, hasn't happened, won't happen, but it raises some interesting themes, where the crew, separated. They went their own ways and were out of touch with one another in many ways. And then there's what Q said to Picard at the very end, when they were back in the courtroom where Q was trying humanity, and he said, Q says to Picard, he said, for one fraction of a second, you were open to options you had never considered. That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknowable possibilities of existence. And I think that's maybe a good way of summing up what we're going to see in this next series. It's not going to be about planet hopping and star hopping. It's going to be something deeper, more profound.
But that's exactly why. Although I can concur that you probably are right about all of your speculation about what it won't be and shouldn't be, for me, Q, because of what you just cited, the way All Good Things ended, I think Q and Picard's connection is extremely important to hit the character, and I think I think it would be a disappointment if they didn't have John Delancey come back and have whatever he's going through in this new series, have Q, maybe not have Q show up immediately, but maybe by the season finale of the first season, something where Q's connected to it, because I feel as though he's important to this, even if it's just a non-Starship adventure about Picard's life. I think Q took more than just a passing interest in the man, Jean-Luc Picard, and that it would be not. I don't think it would make sense for him to just never show up again. I think it's important that he does pop up again. I think they're connected. I think they have some synergy.
Well, I agree with you about that, but tonally, with the kind of direction I think they're going, they would have to reinvent Q, because he's become a comical character, and that's just tonally not what they're going for with this new series, I think. So if you see Q again, it may not be John Delancey, and even if it is, you're going to see a different kind of Q. It's sort of like how they reinvented the Joker between the '60s and moving into the '80s. He was the clown prince of crime, and it was ha ha, and then he became much darker and very dangerous, and by the turn of the century, he'd become a totally frightening character. And I think you'd have to see the same kind of approach taken with Q for that character to work in this new show.
But based on what you just said, Picard, and I'm going to shift this in a minute, but Picard's changing according to what we're hearing. Maybe there's a parallel. Maybe Q's also changing. That's why he wants to visit Picard. Maybe they're both similarly going through something, because we know that Q has gone through, and I doubt this will be brought up really, but we've seen post Next Generation where Q had a child with another Q, and all these other things happened to him with Janeway and all that. But I would not be surprised if Q becomes like the Wolverine to his Professor X, and they both.
I don't see that happening at all. Well, he's not going to be a regular character. He's
not but pops out.
I just think that that is a rehash of Next Generation, and I honestly think that they're not interested in doing that. I'm not saying they won't ever use Q, but I'm saying you're going to see Q in a completely different light than you've ever seen him before. Because again, by the time he was done being on Voyager, he was played for laughs, and that's just not going to work here. And I don't think Patrick Stewart would put up with it. So, I think he's going to have a big say in the direction of this show, and that say has nothing to do with revisiting or rehashing The Next Generation.
I think Hinman wants to say something.
Well, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of bringing in old characters just for the sake of bringing them in. I mean, I think it's nice once in a while. Like, obviously, if you have Picard, doing whatever he's doing, that you hope that he's going to see some familiar faces here and there. But I don't want to see like a show where that's dominating. I don't want to, see like where, oh, look, it's Riker today, and and now Dr. Crusher's coming in. I think that these are characters that need to be used sparingly, because then they have the cooler impact of when you see them. It's like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. But I think you want to see. I think you want to see Picard with a bunch of new characters, like people we hadn't seen before in situations we haven't seen before. I don't, yeah, and I agree totally with Carlos that, Q, for one thing, is too much of a comic character. You would have to totally revamp him, and also remember, Q's omnipotent. Now, to me, that having that kind of power just sitting around, I mean, that's the reason why you had to make him a comical character, because he was just too powerful. He's overpowered. It's kind of the Superman character, except a little more obnoxious. But I just like, in fact, I don't know if Q would work in this new show for me at all.
Is it possible he could work for explaining why, if Data returns, we can explain the Brent Spiner aging, or unless they decide to explain that. I know we're getting into little semantics, but if Brent Spiner always said he won't return because it doesn't make sense to him for Data to look older, but some people speculate, well, what if Data wanted to look older just as part of his emotional journey, like say, he purposely.
Well, I mean, he did have a beard.
Well, remember, Data is dead. He's dead.
I'm sorry, before with the download of Data's mind.
Yeah, well, that's downloading memories isn't the same thing as being resurrected, and you could make it that way, but I think it would just feel cheap, and it would cheapen Data's death. I just don't see that happening.
I totally agree with you, Carlos, except that, and again, this depends on whether they recognize that Countdown comic series, because he did become the captain of the Enterprise when Data's mind emerged and took over B4's body. But again, I tell everybody, just because it happened in that comic doesn't mean that they recognize it when they make this new show.
I feel like in every instance where the people who are making a TV show or making a movie have to choose between what's been published in a comic book or a novel and what they actually want to do in the movie, they never follow what's happened in the comic book or the novels. I mean, that's the reason why canon is canon. So I don't think you're going to see that here in anyone. I would be super surprised. I'll pay you each $20 if it happens, because I just don't see it happening. These are very creative people who want to do things their way, and they don't want to feel constrained by what someone else, 10 years before thought it should be. So I don't see that happening.
I do agree with you. I just think. Sorry, so go ahead, Zon.
Well, I want to hop in on the Q conundrum for a moment.
That's good.
But
like that.
The interesting thing is, we look at the Q from the perspective of John Delancey's Q, when that's never really been the case. Each Q has always had their own distinct and individual personality for what it is they do in the continuum. I mean, does anybody remember Quinn?
Yeah, the suicidal.
Quinn was his own independent Q that did all of this other stuff that we never really see John Delancey ever really do.
Was that the one that was wanting to kill himself?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I mentioned earlier that it might not be John Delancey we see as Q if they bring Q back. But the problem with Q, fundamentally, and Michael said this, so I'll just repeat it quickly and then shut up and let Sun begin again, is that he's omnipotent. Dramatically, everything slows down or stops when you know that you have an omnipotent character who can just go in and fix everything or mess everything up or whatever. And that's not real drama. There's a reason why eventually we saw episodes where Q was depowered, because that was the only way that you could use him realistically.
And yeah, I can understand that and see that completely. But going back to that quote about exploring things that you'd never thought about before, about exploring existence itself. Well, to be honest, there are only two successful ways to pull that off: Wesley Crusher as the Traveler, or having a Q as a companion.
But okay, so just so we don't overdo this one topic, there's one part of this subject that changed today, and Carlos was the one that actually broke. Well, I guess it's been out for a day or two, but he broke this as I saw on Axel Monitor. He talked about this woman who wrote for CBS News, or one of the CBS.
NBC.
Oh,
NBC
sorry, I'm
News.
sorry, not CBS. Exactly the opposite. Their competitor, NBC, and she basically wrote this article that caused a little bit of controversy, and I'm still seeing stuff on my feed where people are kind of outraged by it. And the bottom line, and I prepared a not long at all thing ahead of time that I want to say about this, and I'm going to read it off in a minute. She basically said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, she said the way she's looking at this decision to have Picard come back is they're picking a white aging male character and actor to come back to lead a new series when Discovery has been moving forward with diversity, and they think it's a step backwards. And she went on. It was basically like no offense to it, but social justice warrior type statement where someone's trying to say, this is not a good idea because it doesn't set a good example. First of all, they never wrote a script so far, like Patrick Stewart even said. They're just discussing where this show is going to go. They don't know, and also someone else on Axel Monitor in that same thread, because I'm not going to take credit for something someone else said. I just can't remember who it is that said it. But somebody said, well, it's not like Picard had an all-white crew, so that entire argument doesn't make any sense. Just because the lead is a white male actor has nothing to do with not being diverse, because his entire crew back then in the 1980s into the 90s was diverse. He just happened to be the white male actor that was the captain. I mean, there was so many diverse people on that show. So this person either wasn't really a Trekkie and they were just like trying to do a little bit of research but they had a predetermined idea of that this was an event they could jump on to say, I'm gonna write this article and make a bunch of noise. So I have this response to that before anybody pipes in, if you don't mind. This is just something I prepared. I feel that CBS recognizes the value of bringing back Patrick Stewart as a beloved character, Jean-Luc Picard, and that this decision has absolutely no bearing, nor should it, on the progressive flow of inclusivity that is happening on many beloved sci-fi series such as Star Trek nowadays. When sensitive writers only see a so-called white male aging actor and see it as a call to arms and to defend a righteous crusade that, albeit a good cause, becomes all they take away from that announcement, it actually harms the progress we are making by shining a spotlight on a false flag news issue just to stir the pot and cause conflict in an already tempered fan base. For me, Jean-Luc Picard, as portrayed by Sir Patrick Stewart, was one of the greatest characters that has ever been created for television. He was certainly a role model for an entire generation of Star Trek fans. For this writer to not understand why CBS would want to tap into that well again, especially in an era which could certainly benefit from a man like Picard and his wise words of wisdom, and take away from this announcement the concern, is incredibly telling of the state of modern media. We have become so cynical that we don't see the forest from the trees, and how does this new series set Star Trek backwards when Discovery continues to air at the same time? I don't mean to slam this writer unfairly, but NBC is a far-reaching venue, and this is not some small independent blog. And that's my personal feelings.
Well, I don't think it's the media, I mean, I think that you're casting a bit of a wide net. I mean, this is one
Totally.
person's opinion, which I didn't read, by the
If
way,
it
because
wasn't
it's the
NBC, I would. It's just that she's like voicing NBC, and that's my whole thing about this.
Well, it's an
no,
opinion
she's voicing
piece.
her.
Yeah,
It
but
just
it is on the NBCnews.com website. So I think that the point George is trying to make here is that it's going to be read by a lot of people
Yeah,
because it has that platform.
But I mean, whether it's read by a lot of people or not, I don't think it matters. The thing is that yeah, I do think that there is a day and age, that there's a time where, even in today, where we still don't experience the kind of diversity that I think that we experience. But that doesn't mean that you still can't have shows that that have people have white people in it, or white males in it. It'd be nice to see, a nice mix of all kinds of different people. But considering there's like what 400 scripted television shows that are currently in production right now, I think that there's room for Patrick Stewart to come in and do it. And the thing is that of all the captains, of all the at least all the stars of the past Star Trek shows, outside of William Shatner, Patrick Stewart's probably by far the most famous. So if you want to try to really draw people in, whether it's Star Trek: The Next Generation fans, whether it's X-Men fans, whether it's people who've never probably seen Star Trek before but like Patrick Stewart, probably come in. I mean, Patrick Stewart's probably the best person that you can bring in as a hook for this show, which is why I mean that they brought in Patrick Stewart for a show that they probably didn't even know what they were going to do yet. So now that they got him, now we got to do something with it. That's how big of a hook that he is.
I agree. I just think that for me, when somebody nowadays there's so many, and I completely respect the fights and the struggles that people are trying to, that feminists and social justice uh, reporters are trying to accomplish. I completely applaud them. But sometimes I think people are looking for a fight. And this is an example. I don't think this person is
I completely agree.
I just think she just looks at it like an opportunity to fight when like her go-to thing is, oh, white male, and then that's all she sees. And she's not recognizing. I honestly think that means that she maybe never watched the show. I honestly don't, because she's not understanding the impact of what
No,
she's doing.
she's a fan of the show. I mean, she says it right in the thing.
Well, she claims that, but do you really believe that?
Well, why would she lie? I mean, the
All
point
right, that's a fair point.
is not trying to deconstruct the writer; it's to address the points that
The
she
point she's making.
raises.
Okay, I'll agree with you there. I'll agree with you there.
So, I mean, from my perspective, I just think that there's a link that she has in that article. Maybe you want to add it to the link to your show notes, to an article on Vulture called "Why Star Trek Discovery Needs to Evolve," and it goes on with outlining a bunch of problems that it has with the way it deals with people of color in it, with gay people in it,
And she does support Discovery.
character
I mean, I'll give her some
development.
credit. I'll throw in some credit as above my criticism. Um, Someone pointed out to me earlier, and that they said that they were worried about, like, she's a female writer and they've gotten enough harassment. And you're the one, Carlos, that made a good point that criticism isn't harassment just because it's male or female. You and I weren't even aware it's a female writer until somebody brought it up to us. And the thing is that if someone is going to make a criticism about it, then it's fair to call them out on it as long as it's being done fairly. And like you guys just both pointed out to me something. I said, are they really a fan? I agree with you. Maybe I'm just being passionate about this response. So but they did give Discovery. They did talk about the reason they were concerned was that Discovery is a step forward, and so they're not bashing Star Trek. They're bashing this decision. And that I just realized as I'm talking to you, maybe I need to like step back a little bit and chill on the emotions. But it's hard, because I just don't think people. It's like saying, can we get Captain Kirk back? It's got nothing to do with whether the person's white. It's about this character, So for me, that's like where people sometimes just get a little oversensitive. But I mean,
I don't know. I really wouldn't want Captain Kirk in a new Star Trek if we're playing the TOS Kirk, because that's wow.
depends on who's playing them, right? So
I just think you should stay away from it. The last thing you want, it would completely disrupt the narrative to have Kirk appear. But the point that I think is important to make here is if you read the opinion piece you're talking about on the NBC side, and also the Vulture piece that's linked to from that article, I think what you find is that people project so much of themselves and what they want to see in the world onto Star Trek. That's a good thing. I mean, it's a testament to how Star Trek embodies a lot of values and hopes for people that we attach ourselves to it. But you can go too far and start to so closely tie your identity to what Star Trek does that if it makes a misstep, it turns into a mountain instead of a molehill. And I read these opinion pieces, and to me, it's all projection. I mean, I don't maintain that Discovery was a perfect series, but if you compare it to the first season of any Star Trek series, including the original series, it is the strongest, dramatically, consistency's sake.
Yes, we have talked about this before, but that is a relevant point. I agree with you.
So I just feel like people were piling all of these expectations on the first season of Discovery that no series could ever hope to meet. And so whenever they made a misstep, it became instead a huge problem and something that requires opinion pieces on blogs. And fine, criticize it, but to assume that the entire series is going in the wrong direction because of it, I think is a mistake. TV series take chances, they make course corrections, try new things, discover the value of one character, find out that some part of the original premise just doesn't work anymore, and they change. I expect we're going to see some of that in Discovery as well.
Okay, so the first start of that sentence, the only thing I was thinking about was the Magic School Bus, Carlos. TV series, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy.
Wow. Okay, so just to spin off of that a little bit for the next topic, they just announced that in season 2 they claim, and this has been claimed before, that they're going to do something to explain or change what we know about why the Klingons look the way they do in season 2, and kind of they kind of imply they're going to do like the Enterprise or DS9 explanation as to that there's different families of Klingons as far as why they look different. There's been a lot of weird reactions to this. I've seen when I posted it on my Starfinder group for the audio show I've been doing. A lot of people commented. It's actually one of the strongest reach comments as far as posts I made. And they talk about how it's been mentioned before. Last season, they promised they were going to explain in universe why there's different Klingons. They never did in season 1. They somehow
I never heard them make that promise.
I didn't actually either, but some people were saying they did.
They didn't.
Yeah, I think you're right. They didn't. But even if they explain it, which we've always talked about this, there's so many ways to explain that kind of stuff. But they seem to be making a point out of it in this article. Do you guys really care? Do you think it's gonna? Do you think they said we're gonna see new Klingons? Do you think that means that they're going to please the fans and show the Worf type Klingons, or do you think they're just going to explain that they're to try to sort of reduce the canon arguments? What do you guys think?
I don't even think I don't understand where these canon arguments come from. I mean, I get the idea because, when Deep Space Nine, went back into the Tribbles episode and they had a little bit of fun with the fact that Klingons were different. I mean, to me, it really seemed like up to that point is that we just treated the Klingons like, oh, we just never noticed those ridges before. that it was never like that it was some kind of a change in the story. It's just a change in how we see it.
Right,
It's
right,
kind of
right.
like how it was described when Star Trek Generations, when they took the same Enterprise from Star Trek to Next Generation, pretty much the same bridge, but when you watch Star Trek Generations, there's a lot more people on the bridge. The bridge is a much busier place
That's
than
true.
it was on the show.
And
And
lit
what
totally differently.
Oh yeah, lit
And work
totally
in a
differently.
chair like he did in well, no,
But
he had a chair.
But the thing is that they could have easily said, "Oh, well, we just kind of like just put a new bridge and we made some enhancements." But really, what the set designer said, what I saw in an interview at the time, was that, "Hey, these people were just always there. You just didn't really notice them before." And I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of what that whole suspension of disbelief is, that that some of those things change. To me, like seeing these Klingons the way that they are in Discovery is my mind just says like, oh, that's the way they always have been. And I know that in Enterprise we've tried to explain why they look more human in the original series and everything else, but I'm not opposed to seeing some different Klingons because I think that they don't all have to look exactly the same. But I don't think we're going to see anything too dramatic. Maybe they'll have hair. Maybe, I don't
Well,
know.
you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, Michael, because the biggest thing on the Starfinder thing when I posted it was half of the people who were commenting on it said as long as they have hair, they could forgive the
Oh, that's just
larger
Oh,
body.
good
that's
lord.
just ridiculous.
I
It's
agree, but
ridiculous. I
fans are
mean,
picky.
yeah, that's just it's ridiculous. I think the thing with the Klingons is, there was a signal in the season finale of Discovery that we're going to see some differences in the Klingons. So this idea that somehow they're making a huge course correction because fans didn't like it, I think is it just doesn't hold water. I mean, I think they
Well, I
planned to
don't
move.
completely agree with you there. We talked about
Well,
this
I
last.
mean, I'm not saying it had zero impact
It
on it.
seems like they're
My
going out.
point is
All I'm saying
that
is they're trying to go out of their way to say, "Hey, by the way, we're going to talk about this."
I don't think
well, I
anybody went
mean,
out of their way. I think somebody
that
just spoke up that happened to be working on designs. I don't think that he did some planned, press conference where he discussed the
well,
change in the
it was a
Klingons.
panel discussion at Comic-Con where this came up, I believe, and
Yeah, so it's
uh,
very passing.
yeah, and she basically just talked about it being a fun opportunity to further develop the look and feel of Klingons, particularly given their loss in the war. And I think that's a natural thing to assume. Also, there's like little hints in that season finale about changes in look. If you looked, you saw it in the Starfleet, when Michael Burnham was doing her big speech near the end, and you could look around and you saw in the background, out of focus, people in gold and red and blue tunics. And guess what we see in the next season? Gold and red and blue tunics. If you look at the Klingon High Council scene in the season finale, and you look very carefully, there have been people who've done the screenshots, and they look. There are some kind of modern looking, or old style looking Klingons peppered here and there, where again they're small, they're in the
You could be right.
background, and they're slightly out of focus, but the uniforms look like the Worf type of era uniform, and I think there might have been hair. I don't quite remember because it's been months since I've seen those screenshots. But my point is, these ideas have been part of the producers thinking for quite a while. It's not something that just came up
Oh, I
because
completely agree.
fans were going, I hate the Klingons.
Well, they were, but I do agree with you though. There are fans that did go and, I mean, but those are the ones that caused the toxic
But
fandom.
but fans do that on everything. I
They
mean,
do.
one
That's
thing
true.
that I have learned to do in my entire life of being a Star Trek fan, especially, is that when fans get all up in arms about stuff and they think that everybody has to feel the same way as them, that, oh, I mean, when I was a kid, when I was 11 years old, is when Star Trek: The Next Generation came out, and I remember where there were adults who were calling me all kinds of names because I liked watching The Next Generation, and
Really?
and that it was such a terrible thing that I would watch this show when it was so such an antithesis to to the original series, and and everything else, where that I'm not a true Star Trek fan because I'm watching The Next Generation. I mean, and now now the people say, like, oh, you can't do Discovery because it's not The Next Generation, or anything like that. I mean, it's just fans. It seems like that fans are not happy unless there's some fan outrage about something. All the people who complain about the Klingons and stuff, you probably see what, maybe 400 or 500 people. Let's say it's even 10,000 people online. That still doesn't compare to millions of viewers. So, to me, that's just a tiny segment of people, who want to complain about stuff. And it's fine. Maybe they don't like them. Maybe they do. But that doesn't constitute a massive fan outrage about something.
Yeah, I agree. We have no idea what the numbers are in this. We just know the level of volume that their cries, wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Well, see, this is actually a rather interesting discussion to have, because the same way that we're talking about this article kind of putting Picard in a racist box before there's even a script is kind of the same vitriol we got about Discovery from the crowd that's like, it's too diverse, and then the other crowd going, it's so diverse, we must embrace this. And then the figures start rolling in about who's actually watching the thing, and come to find out, all the people who were like, it's too diverse, are actually falling in love with the show, and all the people, or almost all of the people who were on the it's so diverse, we must embrace it, are like, it's so problematic.
Son, I totally agree with you. I think that's exactly what's I think that's exactly what's going on. Again, it's projections of people's expectations instead of just taking it on its own merits and seeing what they think about it. Instead, they're sort of judging it as a knee-jerk reaction against what they believe Star Trek must be in order to be true Star Trek.
So, just to shift things a little bit to something non-Star Trek, because we've done the first three topics were heavily Star Trek. There's so much going on because we've been hit with so much news lately. Let's shift it a little bit to Doctor Who. I believe most of you, if not all of you, are part of a Time Lord group that I'm an admin in. The other day, there was some news that there was a leak of the new TARDIS interior. I posted it. It was a knee-jerk reaction. I mean, I have since made some modifications after hearing some feedback. And then the BBC and other Sci-Fi Channel and USA Today, I think it was, might have been somebody else, New York Times, somebody, they posted about how there's all these leaks. And we all know these leaks are happening because I've already shared a scene. Well, Michael, maybe not with you. If you want, I'll talk to you later. But a Jodie Whittaker scene got leaked. And then all of a sudden, there was these other leaks that started coming out, including the appearance of the new TARDIS on the inside, because we always know what it looks like on the outside. But it became a big. They flipped out about it after I posted it. Well, not because I posted it, but because in general that it got leaked. It turns out that the person who took the picture, person who designed it, it was an internal leak, wasn't.
You're cutting out, Chooch.
Oh, I'm sorry. The person who leaked it was friends with the producer. He didn't think anything of it. He trusted the person and he talked about this on Twitter. And he took pictures of the TARDIS. And what made the designer, mad was it wasn't the way they intended to reveal it. It wasn't lit right. It was a dull set, so to speak. They usually reveal the TARDIS interior during an episode. That's what made me decide to change the post and remove it because it was. I didn't think it was a spoiler at first, but when I thought about it, they always intend the interior of the TARDIS to be something we see during. And my definition of a spoiler is, and a lot of people agree with this, is if it's meant to be seen on screen as a surprise. if it's something promoted like a trailer, and somebody online says that's a spoiler, like for example, if they show a Walking Dead as part of a trailer for the new season, that's not a spoiler. That's something intended to see it. For example, is meant to die, and they're not going to show it in a trailer, and it happens in an episode, and somebody.
You're still cutting out pretty heavily.
Oh, sorry. So my point is that a spoiler is something's not meant to be revealed. So
No, I'm sorry. How we were talking about the anniversary of my website. Sci-Fi Portal, up until I believe the end of Battlestar Galactica was a spoiler site. That was how we
okay.
got so big. That was, where, we got our, everything. The reason why we switched was only because people like Michael Osceola and others started getting into the game and with their scoops or whatever they would call them. And of course, they had much better time and much better contacts than what I did, and so we just couldn't compete in that level anymore. But a spoiler, I mean, there's one thing to have something that's promotional, that's in a trailer, but a spoiler, when people are out looking for spoilers, that they're not looking necessarily to have the entire thing ruined for them. They are looking for things that would get them excited about it. And the one reason why the people who would feed us information fed us information, and I will tell you that they were people that were part of these shows and part of these movies, maybe even people who wrote them to begin with, is because that these were tidbits that, we didn't want to ruin it totally, but they are things that they really didn't want to get out. It could be a death of a character. It could be some kind of a change. It could be what the TARDIS looks like on the inside, although I try to stay away from visual stuff. But, the thing is but those are spoilers. Those are the kind of spoilers for people, for the market, for the people who are looking for spoilers. Those are the spoilers that they're looking for. They don't want to see just the stuff that you find in trailers. They don't want to see just the stuff that maybe comes out in a publicity shot or in some sort of pretend like it's a spoiler. They want to see these things that nobody else has seen yet. They want to see things ahead of time. These are the kind of people who flip to the end of a book to see how it ends, but still read the book because they want to see what it was like to get to that
That's
ending.
me. Exactly.
And so, so the market for spoilers. The thing about I saw like what you had posted of the of the TARDIS interior, and my thoughts on it is like that. I was like, I'm hoping that that's not lit properly because it looks terrible.
Oh, it's
the
not.
way it was
the
lit.
creator even said it wasn't
Yeah,
lit properly.
It
and so
looks awful.
so my
Yeah.
thought is that if I were the people behind that show, or if I was attached to that show, I'd probably be pretty pissed that was leaked too. Because
I
if
agree.
a photo is going to leak, I would at least want it to be lit properly.
Yes.
And that was just probably in a stand down mode or whatever they call it, like when it's not lit up, to be shot, like it wasn't hot. So so somebody snapped a picture of it, and it looked boring and dull. Like when I used to get to go tour TV sets, for sci-fi shows all the time, and I could tell you that there were areas, especially where they weren't taking us through, but we would kind of work our way in anyway, just because that's what we were. We were journalists and we did that. But but the sets look different, and these are ones that we've seen on TV. But when they're not in that hot mode, when they're not lit properly, they look terrible. I mean, you look at this like, wait, this is really a set, But then they light it up, and it's amazing.
Well,
So,
do you remember the Doctor's Wife when they went into the archived version of Ten's TARDIS, his console room? When Amy and Roy ran in there, it was like a fan service that they made that old set come back because it was an archived TARDIS room, and when they went in there, it was unlit, so it looked totally different than the TARDIS we've seen from Eccleston into Tenet, because it was unlit and it had a greenish hue to it, and they hit a button and the set came to life. And even then, it wasn't exactly the same, but the lighting means everything. It really would, especially with a set like this one that has the crystals and everything. I think it's going to be a huge difference. But it's unfortunate that this person did leak it. I mean, because we're not seeing it properly revealed, and I completely understand from the point of view of the creators, and I understand from the point of view of it wasn't a proper reveal. But at the same time, leaks have been happening on Doctor Who since way back in rows the first episode of New Who. When I remember back in 2005, catching the very first episode about a week ahead of its reveal because someone leaked it. In fact, that's why they changed the name. They created Torchwood. The name Torchwood is an anagram of Doctor Who. If you scramble it, you get the word Torchwood. So Russell T Davies created that so that the tapes would read Torchwood, so that no one could know that those tapes were Doctor Who to leak it. So then they took that name and later used it for the show. But that's the origin of Torchwood as a name. And but leaks have been happening. I got the first 3 episodes of Peter Capaldi, his very first 3 episodes. I'm not gonna lie. When somebody sent me a link and said you can watch them now, I couldn't resist. I mean, I'm not trying. I'm not promoting piracy. I'm not. I'm just being honest. I couldn't resist. It's like I'm a human being.
Oh, you're a fan. Of course you couldn't.
But the thing you have to remember though, when you're especially because these leaked episodes are they tend to be screeners or they tend to be like unfinished.
Oh, right. It didn't have finished text.
Screeners, at least, back in the days when I used to get them, I'm not as active as I used to be, so I don't get as many anymore. But screeners are typically unfinished. And the thing is that the reason, I mean, there's many reasons why you don't want to leak screeners, but the biggest one is that, as entertainment journalists, we're used to it. We know, like, oh, this is not the right music, that there's missing special effects, and, that this probably, there's probably placeholders here, and things aren't fully dubbed in. But if you put that out there to the general public, this unpolished episode, they're going to start watching. It's like, oh, what the hell is this? They're going to think that this is what was intended to be done, and not that it's still a work in progress. And and that's what another thing you have to kind of be careful about with, especially with these pirated episodes. I mean, but the thing is that people, if they want to find this stuff, if they want to know what's going to happen before it happens, there are ways of finding it, and they're going to find it. And and it's just, I mean, I don't know why BBC's getting all up in arms about it, but I mean, those things happen.
I do want to butt in here just a moment, because that's a point I would like to actually point out. BBC is probably getting up all in arms about this because the last several times that we have had a desktop change for the TARDIS, it has been revealed in a Christmas episode.
Not always. Not always, because the Matt Smith episode where he first became the Doctor was not a Christmas episode, and that was and at the end of the episode, Amy was the one that brought us into the new TARDIS.
I said the past couple. You've had.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
There's the first change for Smith's TARDIS, and then there was a tweak of it for Capaldi.
But one of the things that networks and and other production companies, what they have tried to do in order to prevent leaks like this is that they usually try to jump out in front of it, like knowing that, like a thing like a set, especially a Doctor Who set, it's almost impossible to keep that under wraps. I mean, even J.J. Abrams found that out, I think, on the very first day of filming of the 2009 Star Trek film. That when they were filming the Vulcan, I think the Vulcan Science Academy or something, and photos leaked the very first day of filming. And these things happen, and so I think that what you try to see is they jump out ahead of it, where they get these things out in the public ahead of time, to where they don't make those impacts. So I like when Stephen Colbert, when he came and did the Late Show, a lot of people were curious what the new set was going to look like. Would it look like Letterman's? How would they redo the space and everything else? They didn't wait till the first episode to show you. They brought in, they had a photographer come in from, like, I think Entertainment Weekly or something, and shoot some pictures and say, hey, look, here's what it looks like. Now your curiosity is satisfied. Now you just tune in and watch the show. And I think BBC probably should have done that in this case. Sure, they want to have the big reveal as part of the episode, but I think seeing a still of it and seeing it, in the dramatic, in the dramatic context of an episode are two totally different things.
And I think they should, and this is just my opinion, instead of trying to tear down all of and try to do damage control. I made an analogy once a couple days ago that it's like trying to squash every singular ant in your neighborhood and hoping you'll get them all. You need to just own up to it. It's been leaked, and do a proper promotion. That's just my opinion. It's bad. I mean, I feel bad for them that someone leaked it. But when it does happen, instead of trying to, try to just tear everybody down who tries to publish it, I think that's like it's like cockroaches, it's like ants. You'll never get them all. Why not just own up to it and do your own professional, uh, proper reveal, even though you weren't planning it. It will. It's like when people leak things from Comic Con and the trailers, and they have in the past said, okay, we're not gonna try to keep policing everybody. We're gonna just release our proper trailer instead of the ones people are using with their phone. They've done that in the past with certain movies and certain TV shows.
It's all marketing, George, because
Yeah,
the way BBC treats Doctor Who reveals is the same way the gaming industry treats video game reveals. If somebody has key information on something and they leak it months or years ahead of the actual announcement of that thing, for some strange reason, all of these people come out of the woodwork to decry whoever posted this leak as a liar and can utterly just destroy a human person by calling them a liar and calling the stuff fake. And then a year later, or months or a year goes by, and then the reveal happens, and it's like, oh my God, this person was actually right. Well, we better not go apologize.
I remember reading a script for The Force Awakens a year in advance, and it was almost 100% accurate. It talked about the way Kylo Ren stabs Han, the whole 9 yards. There were some minor differences in the script that made me think it was an earlier draft. But sometimes people do. And Game of Thrones, the last season, almost every episode was leaked way ahead of time, including some of the episodes. 100% accurate. Which means, and the same people that leaked it, the same site, they reveal. I'm not going to say anything, but they revealed the scripts to season 8, so the final season. And so when that source leaks it, everybody's like, nope, this ain't true. Well, they said the same thing about but this person, for whatever reason, they have a source, and the source is legitimately leaking stuff. So sometimes there's like this person on the set who clicked the picture. I remember reading the article. He clicked the picture of the TARDIS set, and it was revealed that the guy said on Twitter, and he was somebody I knew. Now that doesn't mean he worked for them. He said somebody I knew. That doesn't mean he worked for them. So in other words, he trusted him. Maybe he was a family friend or somebody. He said, hey, yeah, you can come in here. And he was disappointed to find out it was somebody he knew. Whatever that means. I don't know. What do you think, Carlos? You've been kind of quiet about this.
Well, it's sort of like that old saying, debating the number of angels that can dance on the head of a pin. It's kind of, you can spend a lot of time debating it, but ultimately you're talking about something that's very small. I mean, people who want to find spoilers will find spoilers. People who want to avoid spoilers, by and large, avoid them. I had a roommate who wouldn't even watch, at the end of an episode on television, he refused to watch the, next week on bit because he called that spoilers. Well, I don't, but people have different definitions of what a spoiler is. And, we're definitely seeing that happen in this case as well. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I saw the picture, you and I talked about this earlier. I saw the picture that was posted, and honestly, it looked horrible. And while I can imagine that lighting will make a lot of that set look really good, those like claw-like things that are coming up out of the floor, they look terrible to me. And I had the same reaction to them as I did to the Klingon ship of the dead, because it was the same sort of kind of deconstruction of what we thought about the TARDIS before.
Big difference on this one.
I hope so, because it looks awful.
I remember saying that those claw things, they look like a hand, and then joking that the new Doctor's healing crystal was actually kryptonite.
It does look like the Fortress of Solitude.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, you don't see the Fortress of Solitude is actually it's all angles, consistent angles, whereas this is much more sort of organic and random seeming. So so it really doesn't. Fortress of Solitude thing doesn't really work for me so much because there is a
Only in
pretty
the
clear.
customizing sense.
Yeah, but the main part of this design is those claws, or as I like to think of them, compound fractures where you can see the bone underneath the skin.
The joints.
It's true. There are those metal joints in between
Yeah, the
them.
metal joints. Yeah, exactly. Michael, you were trying to pipe in. What were you going to say?
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say that I think, with the exception of the most recent interior TARDIS with the two level with the library and stuff, that every time that I've first seen an interior of a TARDIS, I've hated it. I hated the Eccleston one when I first saw it, but then I was sad to see it go. I hated the first version of the Matt Smith one. Although I did kind of like the second version, I kind of missed the first version.
So it grows on you.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that it's not necessarily, you're going to look at it and be like, oh, I know that the one thing I didn't like was the weird little like snow ice thing that's at the bottom of the claw parts, but and it looked kind of theme parkish in a way, but at the same time, sets, people don't understand, like, how sets really, if you look at them in regular lighting, once again, if you look at them outside of where they are in their dramatic context, they're going to look corny. The one thing, like, about the Warehouse 13 set, for instance, if you remember Warehouse 13 on Sci-Fi, is that their warehouse, that there's all these metal beams everywhere, these old, like, steel beams, as if it was like you were on a bridge, like under a bridge or something like that. But what's funny is that when you see those things up close, it's actually poorly painted slabs of wood. Which, and you look at it, I was like, how on earth could anybody believe that these are metal? But then you watch it on the show, it's like, oh yeah, you can see it. So I think that people are deconstructing, the thing a little bit too much, and maybe it's not the greatest TARDIS interior, but like I said, I don't know.
Actually,
I've always felt that they all kind of sucked until I got to see them, and
there
then
was an
I
earlier
was sad to see
leak.
them go.
So what you're saying is you redecorated. I don't like it.
Well, there was an earlier leak that I posted at one point on the Time Lords thing, and it only showed the perspective of Jodie entering the TARDIS to look at it for the first time. I guess at the end of the new episode, but the same sort of wall symbols that were on the back side of this reveal in a coral color were on the sides of the police box doors when she entered. They were a completely different color. Whether that was the lighting that was doing that, I don't know. But it was, and if you look at this picture, it's silverish, it's metalish, but they have the same symbols mixed in with the wall on the far side. So when I look at that properly lit version of just the walls around the door, and she's looking at something we haven't seen yet, and then you look at the unlit set, it really makes me think they have some way that they set this up so that you're going to get a different experience completely when you see the end result, because it looks dramatically different. Like, it's a coral color, and then all of a sudden you look at the picture they just posted, or that was leaked, and it's a totally different color. So I kept thinking, why are they two different colors? Is the door part a different color than the whole rest of the wall? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm thinking that it's got to do, it just completely is going to be dependent on the lighting. And maybe that's why the guy that was on Twitter for the BBC got so upset, because they specifically designed it so that the lighting is going to give you a different kind of experience when it mixes with the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, that's going to happen. I mean, it's clear that lighting will play a huge role in what you ultimately see on screen. But
yeah.
So I think it's pretty much a tempest in a teapot. And I'm hoping that the claw things have some sort of interesting explanation at the very least, because honestly, they make me want to retch. But I accept it as it comes, and I think Michael's right. You sort of come to a place where you feel these TARDISes are okay. And I've always been much more obsessed with the different kinds of kind of analog looking controls that you see, in the center console, and haven't really cared as much about the surroundings. But that's just me.
Nerd.
Yeah, we're all nerds. But yeah, we don't see a close up of what the controls look like, but that crystal rotor in the middle, that one is. If you take away the claws, I completely agree with you, Carlos, about the claws. And you take away those claws, the rotor, that central thing that usually goes up and down, or the light goes up and down, is being very crystalline looking. I love the rotor. We'll have to see what happens up close with the buttons and everything. But I love the rotor. I think it's very interesting. But that's just my opinion. So yeah, we've kind of gone we've gone way over the normal amount of time that we go on the show. But you know what? It was a great discussion. So I want to call it here. God, that was a good discussion. I really enjoyed it. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today, and hope that you can join me again whenever I invite you. If you can't, I'll just keep inviting you. That simple. So there was.
I'm looking forward to the episode in which we get to Michael and I get to say we were right about the Picard series.
I have a funny feeling you will get that opportunity in about a year and a half.
Oh, I think we'll hear the premise sooner than that, but
they haven't even written the script yet, though.
I know, but that it'll happen. I mean, we knew a fair amount about what Discovery was going to be about in advance of its premiere. So,
go ahead.
Well, I mean, just you're going to at least know what the premise is going to be.
Yes, and they have they were intending, and I'm sure they did say it's still coming. That Khan miniseries. I'm really not. I'm interested, but I'm not really worried about if it ever comes out. As far as the Khan miniseries, I'm not sure we need it, or it's kind of like the Solo, the Star Wars story. I actually made a joke like Picard, the Star Trek story. No, this is different. We actually do want this. But when it comes to Khan, it's like, do we really need this miniseries that's been announced that they're still going forward with, because they talked about it before all these changes as being something that was supposed to come out. Hey, you know what? If they can make it interesting, I'm cool. But I want to thank you guys for joining me for this episode. That was episode 4 of Super Geeks Season 2. Anybody have any final thoughts?
Well, how about pimping our 2 guests, George?
What's that?
How about pimping our 2 guests? Where we can find them on social media?
Oh, yeah.
I asked it before. I'll ask it again. Michael, where can we find you on social media?
Don't even look for me on social media. I'm hiding.
He's become a social hermit.
Yes, that's exactly it. I've become a Carlos. I mean, if people really desperately want to find me somewhere, which I don't know why, just go to the Axa Monitor page on Facebook. I think I probably talk there more than I do anywhere else. So, so plug for Carlos right there.
Thank you.
That's true.
And for me, I think I'm less of a social hermit than I am a social media curmudgeon. But I also am at the Axe Monitor page on Facebook as well, and you can find my work at axemonitor.com.
You say that, and all I can think of is, get off my Axelon!
Well, yep. And son, what about you? I know that we've talked about this before. You're kind of on standby waiting for the next Tribbles. And by the way, I want to mention happy birthday to Steve Roberts, who is Midnight Shadow.
Yeah, happy birthday, Steve.
He's the host of Tribbles and Ecstasy. He's a good friend of mine. In fact, this is his TeamSpeak server. He is kind enough to lend this to me because he and I have been good friends for quite a while. And this is his server, and Steve is a great guy. He also plays my Alfred on Bat Radio. You should hear him sometime if you don't mind all the cussing. Yeah, he's a great voice actor. He hosts Tribbles and Ecstasy. It's his birthday today, and well, actually no, it's not anymore because here it's just past midnight. But okay, Steve, happy belated birthday.
You realize it's been past his birthday for 5 extra hours.
Ah, darn it! I keep forgetting he's in the UK. All right. Well, it's the intention, right?
The road to hell, George. The road to hell.
I'm a veteran from there. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for joining me as always. I want to thank everyone for joining me, and for everyone out there that wants to tune into future episodes. Hopefully, we'll see you next time.